I have to applaud the TARYN siblings, especially the young woman that escaped out of the house to help free her and her siblings from their own parents. They had been suffering years of abuse. And somewhere down on the inside of their young lady, she said enough was enough. She knew that the way that they were living was not in alignment as a child to a parent. There was something off. And when she got the opportunity, they took it. Hey guys, I'm LARAE and welcome to Taryns Business Hub. So in this video, I wanted to discuss how trauma rewrites our identity. Most people don't even realize when their identity has shifted. They wake up and one day just feel like, why don't I feel like myself? They step into rooms and feel like I'm not my best self. Because the thing is, trauma doesn't always look like tragedy. And we say it all the time, every monster doesn't look the same. Sometimes that trauma is wrapped in spiritual manipulation. Sometimes it's wrapped in the influence that's coming out of someone's mouth. Sometimes it's control disguised as care. It's being told that your strength is a rebellion or that your confidence is pride. Trauma can come from the subtle slights. If someone makes a certain dig about your hair, if someone makes a subtle remark about your weight. And these are not compliments, they're voiced to make you question yourself. And if things are repeated enough, you don't just doubt what was said, you begin to doubt who you are. I had to rewrite my own story. I was coming up in an environment that was pretty strict, and I was able to step away right at the cusp of my 20s. Every decade has a divine assignment, and the decade of the 20s is the decade that you begin to come into your identity. There were things that were put inside of me even as a teenager that walked alongside of me even in my 20s. Thankfully, I had someone to help reaffirm who I was, to speak against the things that were put inside of me. But years later, even decades later, when I would talk to certain people and they would tell me about triggers that they had, certain words that were spoken, those certain words were attached to their identity. And so it will make them feel low about themselves. It will make them question their identity, make them question their esteem because of the fact that the trauma from these words had already taken shape. They planted root inside of them. And so they had a low value of themselves because of the trauma that was able to write their story. That trauma didn't just write their history, it wrote their identity. It wrote who they were as people. Over the years in my 20s and in my 30s, I had to really do the hard work and really come out of the conditioning that I was brought up in. And I had to shed the conditioning. I had to reclaim my voice and reclaim the divine authority that I had over my own life. The only way cycles will break is when you say enough is enough. Trauma, it doesn't just bruise your feelings, it rewrites your reflection. When you look at yourself, you are looking at a bruised version of trauma. That's the reflection that trauma gives off. The lies that were spoken unto you, the put downs, the criticism, the dogmatic behaviors that you were subjected and conditioned to. Trauma will tell you that you're too much, you're too loud, you need to just listen and be quiet. You need to just not try to think on your own and just fall in line. And what this kind of trauma does to the soul is that if you stay in it long enough, you begin to believe the limitations that are wrapped around your life. The longer you stay in the trauma, you won't push past those lies. It becomes harder and harder for you to push past those lies. You begin to think, I can't do it. You begin to think, I must depend on this systemic cycle cycle of emotional abuse. You begin to think the monster that I'm following, maybe he really is not a monster. This person that I'm in a relationship with, maybe they not so bad. This person is abusing you. This person is hitting you. This person is calling you out your name. And you begin to condition yourself to think that's the norm. That's your standard. There are certain systemic emotional narratives that I have seen played out in different places, and that is to criticize behavior nonstop, to tell a person that they're arrogant, to tell a person that they're always flawed in a subtle way, to tell a person that whatever you do is not good enough. You can compliment them, but then it's gonna always be some criticism attached to it. You can never really go too far because the aim, it isn't about growth, but it's about submission. And so you're gonna always be arrogant. You're gonna always have an issue. And then people take on this self-degradation attitude that it becomes the norm to consistently criticize yourself. It becomes the norm to say things like, I'm not perfect, but it opens the door for harsh criticism. It opens the door for you to feel small. It opens the door for you to begin to be a puppet so someone else can pull the strings over your life. I don't echo the rhetoric that wholeness is suspicious. You can't be whole in your life. Maybe it's not about perfection, but it is about stability. And maybe it's not about just completely being flawless, but it is about being in alignment. And you can walk this earth whole and in a line. You can be a beautifully flawed creature and still be aligned with who you're destined to be. You don't have to think that you're your worst mistake. You don't have to make people feel like you are unforgivable. The choices and the things that has happened over your life that you can't be redeemed. Messages that stay in your thoughts, messages that live in your body, messages that put you in the beggar's posture, things that were said to you that make you hesitant to speak your truth. If you find yourself apologizing for simply existing, then that's not your personality. That's not your identity. That's you being conditioned. You are not broken. You have just been conditioned. And you have to know that for yourself, that there isn't anything wrong with you. And you have to move past the trauma of being conditioned. And let me tell you the difference between identity and conditioning. Identity is who you are. Conditioning is who you learn to be. You may have been shaped by what you had to adapt to, but adaptation is an alignment, and survival isn't authenticity. The very behaviors that have helped you endure may be the very behaviors that are actually blocking your freedom of becoming. There may be someone that is watching this video right now and under the wrong advisement, and that's pretty much like waiting for rain in a drought, convinced that your loyalty and patience will yield you a harvest. It won't work. Trauma doesn't produce a harvest. Trauma doesn't produce good results. Trauma doesn't produce wholeness. Part of healing from these traumas are more than just feeling better. It's about remembering, knowing who you were before the world or a specific person or someone that you partner with told you who you are. It's before those labels and lies were placed against you. So when you think about yourself, don't think about yourself as being too much. You were just misunderstood. There are certain parts of you that may have been shut down. Maybe you have a loud laugh, or maybe you have big ideals, or maybe you are ambitious and confident. Maybe you feel with deep emotions. Maybe you do have a sensitive nature, or maybe you are the type of person that asks bold questions. And all of that is fine because that's part of who you are. If you had to downplay any parts of yourself and shrink just to be accepted, then that's not true belonging. And here's the thing, the full expansive version of yourself is not a threat. You have to rise to meet your full expansion. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be restored. There are people that never leave these cyclical cycles of abuse. They stay conditioned because of fear, They stay conditioned because they don't trust the unknown. They stay conditioned because of someone telling them, you won't make it without me. I have to applaud the TARYN siblings, especially the young woman that escaped out of the house to help free her and her siblings from their own parents. They had been suffering years of abuse. And somewhere down on the inside of their young lady, she said enough was enough. She knew that the way that they were living was not in alignment as a child to a parent. There was something off. And when she got the opportunity, they took it. And now you could see her living in her full bloom. They have had challenges, but at the same time, they're in a healing lane. Never shrink your talents and your gifts. Never hide your potentials. Actually, that has been the greatest act of self-honoring that I've been able to do for myself. The traumas that I experienced in my own personal life, I'm not bitter about those things. Thankfully, some of the things that happened to me did happen to me because it set me on the trajectory that I've been on for the last 20 years. Thankfully, those things did happen to me because it set a precedence for who I knew I wanted to become. And so healing is not about erasing your past. It's about reclaiming your authorship, reclaiming your own choices again, and rebuilding from a posture of truth, not trauma. When you get to a point where you begin to unlearn old patterns, unlearn bad behaviors, reassess those pain points, reassess who's in your life, reassess who's in your ear talking to you. Then you can begin to return to the blueprint of your life. So no, you are not broken. No, you are not too far gone. No, you are not your worst enemy. No, you are not your worst mistake. No, you are not your deepest wound, or you are your deepest critic. You are whole. You are just layered. And every layer that you peel back, every layer that you take authorship and you reclaim for yourself, it's about going back to restoring your rightful identity. You're not too difficult. You're not defective. You're not an invalid. You are rising from conditioning and returning to your divine design. So I hope that this message helped. I definitely hope that this message has been a healing map for anybody that's facing trauma, anybody that begin to question themselves or question their identity, anybody that needs to put another mirror up and not the mirror of trauma. I definitely hope that it resonates with you and that you will share this message with someone else that it can be a healing virtue for. If this spoke to something deep inside of you, then know you are not alone and you're not crazy for wanting to be whole. You should be whole. Wholeness should be the standard. I share more reflections on this channel about identity, divine alignment, healing from trauma, reshaping loss into purpose, and other great things that will help move your business and your life forward. If you haven't already done so, I would definitely encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date with more videos like this that will continue to come down the pipeline. If this message resonated with you, if you're someone that has shed old traumas and you're living in your truth now, leave a comment now. Share your story because you don't know how sharing your story can be a word of encouragement and a word in season for someone else. If you want deeper learning, grab a copy of my book, Intentional Progress, Get Unstuck and Start Your Business Now. And lastly, I want to personally invite you to our intentional living community at Taryns Business Hub. Visit the website, www.TarynsBusinessHub.com, and opt in to our newsletter, The Blueprint Brief. The Blueprint Brief is where weekly encouragement and insights meets bold spiritual strategy. You get all of it at once. So thanks again for watching. In the meantime, in between time, you'll see me in the next video.